If you've been grinding through parts 1 and 2 of this series, you already know that hidden set killers don't look like mistakes, they look like effort. But this one, the one we've been building toward, is the most dangerous of all, because it's the moment every gym bro celebrates. Legs shaking, vision tunneling, you crank out that final rep and think, that's where the magic happens. That's where the gains are born. And I'm here to tell you with actual science behind me that you've been lied to. That last rep might be costing you close to 40% of your weekly muscle growth. And the guy screaming, "one more," in your ear is not your friend. He's a gains thief in a tank top. Welcome back to RoarReps HQ. This is part 3, the finale, and we're going to dismantle one of the most sacred beliefs in bodybuilding culture. The idea that training to absolute failure on every single set is the key to maximum muscle growth. It's not just wrong, it's actively working against you. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why, and exactly what to do instead. We've got biomechanics, we've got real research from 2025 and 2026, and we've got a character named Marcus who's been training harder than you for 6 months and somehow looks exactly the same. Sound familiar? Let's get into it. Let's talk about Marcus. Marcus is 28, he trains 5 days a week with zero equipment, just bodyweight, pure calisthenics the way we do it here. He's disciplined, he's consistent, and every single set he does, he goes to absolute failure. Last rep, form breaking down, shaking, grinding. He thinks this is the formula. He's seen it on every fitness page, heard it from every coach. Leave nothing in the tank. And after 6 months of this, Marcus has made about half the progress he should have. He's confused, he's frustrated, and honestly, he's overtrained. Marcus is going to be our guide through this whole video, because Marcus is most of us before we knew better. Here's the core question this whole video is going to answer. If training hard is good, why is training to absolute failure bad? And the answer lives in a concept called reps in reserve, or RIR, which sounds like corporate jargon but is actually the most important number you're not tracking. RIR just means how many reps you could have done before your form collapsed completely. So if you stop a set with 2 reps left in the tank, you're at 2 RIR. If you grind to the very last possible rep, you're at 0 RIR, absolute failure. And here's where it gets interesting, because the difference between 0 RIR and 2 RIR is not the difference between gains and no gains. It's the difference between smart training and self-sabotage. I'll show you the math in a minute, and it's going to surprise you. So let's back up and understand what actually happens to your muscle during a set, because this is the biomechanics nobody wants to talk about. When you start a set of push-ups, your body recruits the minimum number of muscle fibers needed to complete the movement. As you get deeper into the set and fatigue builds, your nervous system recruits more and more fibers, including the big, high-threshold motor units that are most responsible for hypertrophy. This is why the hard reps matter. The last few reps of a challenging set are where maximum fiber recruitment happens, and that's the stimulus that drives growth. So far, the train to failure crowd is right, but here's where it falls apart. When you push past that high recruitment zone and grind into absolute failure, the rep where your form breaks down and your body is doing everything it can just to survive, something shifts. The target muscle is no longer the primary mover. Your body starts compensating, recruiting stabilizers, shifting load to joints, changing the movement pattern entirely. For calisthenics athletes, this is especially brutal. A push-up that turns into a worm crawl in the final rep isn't loading your chest and triceps anymore. It's loading your lower back and your ego. And that last rep, it generates disproportionate systemic fatigue compared to the actual hypertrophic stimulus it produces. You're paying a huge recovery tax for a very small training benefit. Serious, here's the number that should stop you cold. Meta-analyses from 2025 confirm that stopping 1 to 3 reps short of absolute failure, that's 1 to 3 RIR, produces similar muscle hypertrophy to training all the way to 0. Similar, almost identical gains, but the recovery cost is dramatically lower. And the 2026 American College of Sports Medicine Resistance Training Guidelines actually updated their recommendations to reflect this, moving away from rigid failure-based training and toward auto-regulated effort using RIR. This isn't bro science. This is the current scientific consensus. The fitness industry just hasn't caught up yet, because leave 2 reps in the tank doesn't make a great Instagram caption. Now here's where the 40% number comes from, and this is the part that genuinely got me when I first saw it. It's not that one last rep destroys 40% of a single set's value. It's what that last rep does to everything that comes after it. When you train every set to absolute failure, your systemic fatigue accumulates faster, which means your subsequent sets in the same session are compromised. Your output drops, your form degrades earlier. And across a full training week, The cumulative fatigue from failure-based training can reduce your effective training volume by roughly 40% compared to what you could have achieved training at 1 to 2 RIR. You're not just wasting that last rep, you're making every other rep that week slightly worse. That's the hidden math nobody does. Let's bring Marcus back into this. Marcus does 4 sets of push-ups per session and he goes to absolute failure every single time. His first set, he gets 25 reps. Second set, 18. Third set, 12. Fourth set, 8. And he thinks this is great because he's working hard. But here's what's actually happening. By set 3 and 4, his chest is so fatigued that his triceps and front delts are doing most of the work. The target muscle, the pecs, is getting maybe 60% of the stimulus it would get if Marcus had stopped at 22, 16, and 10 reps respectively. And then tomorrow, when Marcus should be recovering and growing, his nervous system is still in damage control mode from the failure reps. He's not recovering, he's just surviving. Okay, so this is the midpoint of the video, and I want to make you a specific promise before we go deeper. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you the exact RIR framework that elite calisthenics athletes actually use. Not the vague, leave some reps in the tank, advice you've heard before, but a specific set-by-set protocol that tells you exactly when to stop and why. And then after that, I'm going to show you the one exception, the single scenario where training to failure actually is the right call. Because there is one, and getting it wrong in either direction costs you. Stay with me. Before we get to the protocol, let's address the elephant in the room, or more accurately, the guy on stage at the 2026 Pittsburgh Pro. Mikkel Krizenik just won that show 6 days ago, and I guarantee you every comment section is full of people saying, see, those guys train to failure, that's why they're massive. And look, I'm not going to pretend elite bodybuilders don't push hard. They do. But what you're not seeing is the periodization, the structured cycles where failure training is used selectively, not as a default on every set of every session. The guys making predictions for the New York Pro right now, the Ian Valliers and Seth Ferrises of the world, they're not just grinding to failure every rep. They're managing fatigue like a science project, which is exactly what we're about to teach you. All right, here's the RIR protocol, and this is the practical framework that changes everything for calisthenics training. Think of your sets in 3 categories. Your first set of any exercise is your freshest, so you can push to about 1 RIR, 1 rep short of failure. This is your highest quality set and it should feel challenging but controlled. Your middle sets, sets 2 and 3, you're targeting 2 RIR. You've accumulated some fatigue, and pushing harder here just eats into your recovery without adding meaningful stimulus. And your final set, this is the counterintuitive one, you're also stopping at 2 RIR, not going to failure. Because by the time you're on set 4, your form is already compromised, and grinding to 0 just piles fatigue onto a set that's already producing diminishing returns. Now here's the part that trips people up. How do you actually know where your RIR is? Because if you've been training to failure for years, your perception of effort is completely miscalibrated. You think 2 RIR feels like you're barely working. This is a real problem, and it's why the ACSM Guidelines specifically recommend occasional calibration sets, meaning you go to failure once every few weeks on a low-risk exercise, just to reset your internal gauge. For calisthenics, this might be a set of bodyweight squats or a simple plank hold where form breakdown is obvious and injury risk is low. You do it, you feel where true failure actually is, and then you use that information to set your RIR targets for the next few weeks. It's like recalibrating a scale. You only need to do it occasionally, not every session. Curious, so when does training to failure actually work? Because I promised you there's one exception, and here it is. Isolation exercises on low-risk movement patterns. Think bodyweight leg extensions, glute bridges, wall sits, even certain core exercises. These are the scenarios where going to failure occasionally makes sense. Why? Because the form breakdown risk is low, the systemic fatigue generated is relatively contained, and the muscle being targeted is isolated enough that compensation patterns don't kick in the same way they do on compound movements. A set of glute bridges taken to failure isn't going to wreck your nervous system or shift load to your lower back the way a failure push-up will. So the rule is, compounds get RIR management, isolations can occasionally see failure. That's the line. Let's talk about the recovery math, because this is where the 40% number really crystallizes. The research is clear that optimal training volume for muscle growth sits around 10 to 12 direct sets per muscle group per week. Now, if you're training to failure on every set, your effective quality sets, the ones where the target muscle is actually being loaded correctly with good form, might be 6 or 7 out of those 12. The other 5 or 6 are compromised by accumulated fatigue. But if you're using RIR management, all 12 sets are quality sets. You've just doubled your effective stimulus without adding a single extra set to your program. That's not a hack. That's just not sabotaging yourself. And here's the thing about progressive overload, the other hidden casualty of failure training that nobody talks about. Progressive overload is the actual engine of muscle growth. You need to be doing more work over time, whether that's more reps, more sets, or harder variations. But if you're constantly training to failure, your fatigue levels are so elevated that you can't actually apply progressive overload consistently. You're not getting stronger on your push-up variations week over week because you're always recovering from the previous session's failure reps. RIR management fixes this automatically because you're never so deep in a fatigue hole that you can't add a rep or progress a movement next session. Marcus, by the way, hadn't added a single rep to his push-up sets in 8 weeks. That should have been his first warning sign. Whispers, here's what the train-to-failure culture doesn't want you to know. The reason it became so dominant isn't because the science supports it, it's because it feels like you're working hard. Absolute failure is a visceral, undeniable sensation. You know you gave everything. And that feeling is addictive because it tricks your brain into equating suffering with progress. But muscle doesn't grow in response to your suffering. It grows in response to mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. All 3 of which peak in the 2 to 3 reps before failure, not at failure itself. The failure rep is the receipt, not the purchase. You already bought the gains 2 reps ago. Now let's talk about something that compounds this problem for calisthenics athletes specifically. And this is the part that genuinely surprised me when I dug into the research. In equipment-based training, when your form breaks down on a bench press, you can just rack the bar. The movement stops. But in calisthenics, when your form breaks down on a push-up or a pull-up, you don't have that option. You have to complete the descent or the ascent, which means the compromised rep actually lasts longer and generates more joint stress than the same failure rep would with equipment. Your wrists, your elbows, your shoulders, they're absorbing load in positions they were never designed for, during the phase of the movement where your muscles are least able to protect them. Failure in calisthenics isn't just inefficient, it's a direct injury risk. And this brings us to the most surprising finding in this whole series, the one that I genuinely did not see coming when I started researching Part 3. Studies from 2025 and 2026 show that athletes training with progressive overload and proper RIR management, without ever training to failure, show an 80% lower injury rate than those using failure-based training. 80%. And here's the kicker, their hypertrophy outcomes were not significantly different. So you can get essentially the same muscle growth with a fraction of the injury risk, just by stopping 2 reps short. That's not a compromise. That's a straight upgrade. And yet the no pain, no gain crowd is still out here acting like stopping before failure means you're soft. Okay, let's get practical. Here's exactly how Marcus and you should restructure a calisthenics session using RIR management. Take your main compound movement, let's say push-ups. You warm up, find your working weight or variation, and your first set you push to 1 RIR. You stop with 1 rep left. Write down how many reps that was. Sets 2 and 3, you target 2 RIR, so 2 reps short of where you stopped in set 1. And your 4th set, same thing, 2 RIR. Now here's the key. Next session, your goal is to add 1 rep to at least 2 of those sets. That's progressive overload in action, and it's only possible because you're not buried in fatigue from grinding to failure. This is the system. It's not complicated, but it requires you to actually pay attention instead of just suffering. Now I want to address the most common pushback I get on this because I know it's already forming in your head. But if I don't go to failure, how do I know I'm working hard enough? And this is a fair question, honestly. The answer is, you track your reps and you make sure they're going up over time. If your push-up numbers are increasing week over week, you're working hard enough. If they're flat or declining, like Marcus's were, that's your body telling you the failure training is generating more fatigue than adaptation. The proof is in the law, not in how wrecked you feel afterward. Feeling destroyed after a session is not a badge of honor, it's a warning label. Let's also talk about rest between sets, because this connects directly to the RIR framework, and it's another area where calisthenics athletes get it wrong. The research is consistent. Resting at least 2 to 3 minutes between heavy compound sets preserves your training volume and optimizes the hypertrophic response. Most people are resting 60 to 90 seconds because they feel like longer rests mean they're not working hard enough. But shorter rest means your next set starts with less recovered muscle, which means you hit failure earlier, which means you're training at a lower effective RIR than you intended. It's a cascade of compromises. 2 to 3 minutes between sets isn't laziness, it's how you make sure every set counts. Here's the part where I want to be honest with you, because I think it matters. I've seen this RIR approach work for most people, not everyone, but most. There are some athletes, particularly those who are very experienced and have excellent body awareness, who can train closer to failure more frequently without the same recovery penalty. Their nervous systems are more efficient, their form holds up better under fatigue, and their RIR perception is highly calibrated. But here's the thing, if you're watching this video, you're probably not that person yet. And even if you are, the RIR framework still gives you a ceiling that protects you on your worst days, your most stressed days, your least recovered days. It's a floor that keeps you building even when life gets in the way. So where is Marcus now? 6 weeks after switching to the RIR protocol, same exercises, same session frequency, just stopping 2 reps short and resting properly between sets, Marcus added 4 reps to his max push-up set. His pull-up numbers went from 6 to 9. His dips went from 8 to 12. And here's the thing that really got him. He's not more sore after sessions anymore, which he initially thought meant he wasn't working hard enough. But his measurements told a different story. His chest circumference went up by nearly an inch. His arms filled out. The progress that was invisible for 6 months started showing up in 6 weeks, just by removing the thing he thought was his biggest advantage. That last rep, that grinding, shaking, vision tunneling failure rep, gone, and he's growing faster than ever. Excited, and this is the payoff of the entire 3-part series. Parts 1 and 2 showed you the killers hiding in your setup, the ego reps, the junk volume, the form breakdown you weren't catching. Part 3 just showed you that the thing you thought was your weapon, absolute failure, maximum effort, leave nothing in the tank, was actually the final hidden killer all along. The irony is brutal. The harder you try, the more you were sabotaging yourself. And the fix isn't to work less, it's to work smarter, with a specific number in your head every single set. 1 to 2 reps in reserve. That's it. That's the whole secret. And now you know it. Here's your one action for today. And I mean today, not next session, not next week. Go find your training log and look at the last 4 weeks of your main compound movements. Are your reps going up? Are they flat? Are they actually declining? That data will tell you immediately whether you're in a fatigue hole from failure training. If your numbers are flat or declining, your first move is to drop every set by 2 reps starting next session and add 2 minutes to your rest periods. Do that for 2 weeks and watch what happens. If your numbers start climbing again, you've found your answer. The gains were always there, you were just burying them under fatigue. Now go train, and stop 1 rep early. That's the most productive thing you'll do today. If this series changed how you think about training, the next video you need to watch is our deep dive on progressive overload for zero equipment athletes, specifically how to keep adding stimulus when you can't add weight. Because once you've fixed your RIR and your recovery, progressive overload becomes your only remaining lever, and most calisthenics athletes have no idea how many options they actually have. It's not just more reps. There's a whole system, and it's the logical next step after everything we've covered in parts 1, 2, and 3. That video is linked right now. See you there.